Hello, and welcome back to Of the People. I'm Robert Chernin,
I'm
and
Ericka Redic.
we are back. Thanks for staying with us. Ericka, Dr. James Lindsay, I know we're not supposed to call him a doctor. What a force.
Yeah,
What a force. Just a
yeah,
great interview with him and so much information to process about what he calls cultural Marxism, what I would call, sort of wokeism is the new religion.
yeah. Well, and that's what, I find it really fascinating. I was just on a podcast, someone else's show last night, Larry Sharp, who's running for governor in New York. And there was a conversation with some of the guests about how we shouldn't be engaged in the culture war and that that's what's keeping us divided and we should just disengage from that. And I'm like, no, that's ground zero for the problem. They want us to hate each other. And so it is not that we should be engaged in the culture war and continue the hatred, but to point out where they are trying to divide us and just how they are trying to divide us. And in the end, we're all Americans. And what should be uniting us is this idea of rights and duties and responsibilities, bringing our communities back together again, setting aside the demographics that make us different, and instead remembering that we are all Americans who ultimately want the same thing, which is to be, to pursue our own idea of happiness, to be safe in our homes, to have a good education for our children, and to worship our gods as we see fit. And so, I just love how he's got this big, huge brain, but he can still kind of just articulate the history and how we got here. And they say, knowing your history makes it so you don't repeat it. So,
Well, it actually say if you forget the past, you're condemned to repeat it.
right. Yeah. That thing.
Yeah. that thing. Exactly.
So let's not repeat it, y'all. Come on now.
Well, I think look, there are practical applications to this. The real question is what there's so much information, what do you do with it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
one of the takeaways for me, which obviously we do this because you and I care and we're passionate, is get involved. Don't rely on sort of the institutions to get your news. Go get your own news. Get involved, whether it's on
Yeah.
the state level, the local level, the federal level. But more important is to understand what's happening. I mean, sure, we shouldn't fight the culture war. We should just capitulate. Is really what that other guest on your other podcast, I'm sure, was basically saying.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the other thing people need to remember here, the people that are pushing this culture war are not the majority in America. And
Yeah.
I believe that it was one of our other guests, who was Jakob Buyens, who said this whole silent majority thing,
Yeah.
right, is where the problem is. Because I believe the majority of Americans don't buy all this crap, all this
Yeah.
culture, wokeism, culture war. But this really is taking down America from within because they're going after these traditional institutions. I
That's
do
right.
want to bring up the name that I brought up before, which is Yuri Bezmenov. He is a former KGB agent who escaped Soviet Russia, came to Canada in the 70s, and gave this long interview, which is Bezmenov, Bezmenov. Folks, Yuri, Yuri. Look it up. It's on the internet. And what he basically
Definitely.
says is that this is what you're seeing in America is a long-term decentralized plan put in place by the old Soviet regime to co-opt, to go get the institutions and culturally embed these values and change America's values from within. And James Lindsay was 100% correct that if you take over education, you're training the next generation of leaders. And these leaders will be inculcated or given these values that are not American values. They are Soviet values, or they're communist or socialist values. And I know everybody sort of shuts their ears with all of this. But what I found most informative from him, and there was, Lord knows, a lot, is the direct lineage of the authorship of the different strands of communism in the world, because there's not just one. It's just not from the Soviet Union.
Right.
Direct line through Barack Obama. And if there's one segment I think we should highlight in the show, and Lord Benjamin, let's make a clip of that one, is that lineage to Barack Obama. That needs, because that's really what people need to understand, because most people go, oh, that doesn't exist. That's bullshit. And it's not.
Oh, yeah. And I love how, communism hasn't really been tried. Socialism hasn't really been tried.
Now you sound like Bernie Sanders.
Oh, my God. It's like, whether it's China, Venezuela, Cuba, Marxists will try to deny that communism ever really existed, or socialism has ever really been done correctly. And it's like, nah, bro. It's been done correctly. It's been done. There is no way to create the kind of revolution that Marx talked about without there being a tremendous amount of force, coercion, death, and destruction. That is just the reality, because the human spirit does not want to be tyrannized. And, we can argue certainly all day that there are some people who are absolutely willing and happy to be tyrannized and just want to be told what to do and will go along with anything. But at some point, people are going to fight back. And you can't just take people's stuff without there being a consequence. And so, and the denial of human nature, I think, is a hallmark of any Marxist, that we can remake man in this image that he cares about his neighbor, and we're all just gonna get along in this utopia. And it is a lie. It is an absolute lie. And people, if they could understand that one thing, that the reality of human nature cannot be changed. It is unchanging and has been since the beginning of time. People need to just get over it. And we mitigate that they can change it. All you can do is mitigate the harm that we can do to one another. Humans are going to be humans, period.
Okay.
That's
Does that mean you're human and I'm human, since humans
it's
are going to
true.
be humans? Sorry, I mean,
as far as I know, although there's all these lizard people on airplanes now, which is a whole other topic.
I thought I saw one on the flight yesterday. If you're watching the podcast, I'm in a safe house somewhere in the middle of America. I can't tell you where, but I was on a plane yesterday escaping. It did take me a while.
Yeah.
Look, the important thing here is practical application of all of this, right?
Yeah.
And why it's important that moms for liberty are fighting for what's taught in the schools. Understand why parental rights are important. Understand why school choice is important.
That's
because
right.
it starts and it ends with educating the next generation. We've already lost this generation, but in terms of the whole culture war, it's really simple. You're in a war. So the question is whether it's a hot war or not. And of course, the other side just wants you to capitulate and lay down, but understand that that's what's going on here. So, it is, well, I'll tell you, there's so much going on. And we didn't get to half of what I wanted to cover, because real practical application is all the crap that the Biden administration is throwing at us, or doing or not doing, because I mean, it was whether it's, and we'll talk about it next episode or next show, but the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I did find out a little bit about China buying up around the Travis Air Force Base. Oh, by the way, remember we talked about how the Biden administration is defunding hunting and archery programs in the schools. So you have two senators, Sinema and Manchin, because this was passed under the Bipartisan Safety and Communities Act. If you remember, there was a shooting, I think it was in a diner in Buffalo, and then obviously Uvalde in the school in Texas. So this was a gun control act that basically used vague language about not, funding dangerous weapons or the education or how to use dangerous weapons. And here you have the Democrats and Biden extending it to hunting and archery. And now you have Senator Sinema and Manchin up in arms. But
Wow.
Anyway, I digress. There are practical applications for all this culture war stuff that people say, oh, either we're not really in a culture war or we shouldn't fight back in the culture war. Sorry, not who I am and not who I'm going to allow anyone around me to be. This is not about fighting with, ladies and gentlemen. This is about fighting for.
That's right.
Keep that in mind.
That's right.
Folks, we are getting the high sign from our producer. This has been a whirlwind of a show. Again, our thanks to Dr. James Lindsay for coming on and educating us in no uncertain terms.
Yes.
Email us. You email me, Robert C. at acekfund.org, acekfund.org, or better yet, Twitter at @RBChernin. Ericka, they can get you at where?
generallyirritable@gmail.com and Ericka Redic on Twitter. And actually, they can see 2 other interviews with Dr. James Lindsay on my channel, Generally Irritable. So they're a little bit even longer, long form. So I encourage everybody to go check those out too.
And folks, download us wherever you get your podcasts, whether it is Amazon or Google or Apple, although some people told me we have a little issue with Apple, but wherever you get your podcast, we're on all of them.
Go
there and leave us some feedback. If you can't give us 5 stars, tell me why. Give us some criticism. Promise you I can take it, or we can take it. And for the record, she wasn't generally irritable today. Folks, you've been listening to Of the People. I'm Robert Chernin.
I'm Ericka Redic.
And we will see you next week.